And action! Chris had a question about introducing young people to sports. And this is how I would do it. I would look at, as a physician, I look at the biggest problems that I see now in my 40 to 50-year-olds. And that's usually obesity and its diseases, those cluster diseases that come with obesity. High blood pressure, heart disease, cholesterol, prediabetes, all those things come on with the diagnosis. And obesity doesn't just start in your 40s and 50s. It's accumulated over several decades. And if you reverse engineer what is afflicting 2 of 3 Americans, you can kind of take it back to grade school. In grade school, when I was in school, we had the Presidential Physical Fitness Awards. It was, I believe, started by Kennedy. And then during the 70s and 80s, Arnold Schwarzenegger came around and kind of reintroduced or fluffed up the idea about exercise. I think it's fallen by the wayside. I don't know about the other school district, but the Chicago Public School District holds it valuable. But usually I'll see in 8th grade and senior year high school, you can opt out of activity. And I'm thinking that that's a shame because, again, if you have an individual that doesn't do any sports, says, I don't like exercise, can you imagine what happens to that kid, that young person, as they get to start families and get older? Well, they're going to have the diseases that manifest, and as I talked about them already. So I think we as parents, while you're shaping and while the kid has an obligation to listen to you, you should try to introduce several different concepts. Number one would be a group activity or a group sport. Football, basketball, baseball, soccer, things like that would be important because you have camaraderie, you have dependence on other players, you have a coach relationship to become accustomed to. Usually you'll find that in most schools, so it's not too hard to find. Then you have the individual sports to introduce them to. Track and field, cross country, swimming, those are where you work with a team, but you're also very individualized. And you can excel and develop your own individual talent. You can find your talents, develop them. I wouldn't do just one. I'd introduce one maybe every different summer. That way you have a little sprinkling, you at least tasted it, you had the kid try, and if they didn't like it after a season, then that's fine, at least they tried. Then you have a skill sport, something like golf or arrows, bow and arrow, I'm not sure the archery. But again, I'm not sure about what's available in your school district, but you might be able to find it in a park district. Skill sports are important too because they fine-tune the connection between hand-eye coordination, breath. And that brings me to the next thing, martial arts. I think when I was growing up, it was rare to find it, and usually it was just Asians that practice martial arts. Now, there's different forms of martial arts from different countries or continents, and I think it's easy to find a different dojo or school around the area. You might have to travel a little bit, but you should research. And as far as which one, kind of depends on which is kid-friendly, but most of them in the area will be based on having a lot of kids and families participate, except for the very difficult ones to practice, but that's another blog in itself. And it also develops a sense of self-discipline, depending on the teacher, I believe, but again, I'll probably blog that in the near future. And then something with cardiovascular, whether it's running, biking, swimming. I think I talked about that already as being an introduction into the individualized, trying to develop your own talents. But I think just having the feeling of fitness, cardiovascular, introducing something, it doesn't have to be all 3 of those in the same summer, but having in a sport type coach environment, I think would help the individual excel in the activity. You would think that, swimming, but getting on a bike is easy, but there are fine-tuned ways of learning the finer techniques on what kind of shoes to buy, how to work on stride, how to work on shoulders and swimming, how to work on breath, how to work on getting down into easy pedaling. So I think that having a coach teach, it takes it to the next level. And again, if you initiate that spark of activity in one of those endeavors that I just mentioned in the kid, it might bring out what's inherently ready to be unleashed, versus asking a kid, hey, you want to go outside? Nah. You know, it's too easy. It's way too easy to stay on a computer and be engulfed in watching and participating in these forums and games that you would find on the internet. If you've ever just sat there and watched a kid play, they can be there for hours playing different games. And the technology now and the resolution is really cool versus when I used to play with PlayStation or Donkey Kong machines when I was a kid. I mean, that was enticing. I remember going in LaSalle College, having to put quarters in after dinner time and just playing long sessions of Donkey Kong or Pac-Man to the point of, oh, we got to go back and study. And can you imagine that the resolution back then was lousy. Now with the high-tech stuff and the point of view kind of playing, it's even if you don't want to play, even if you're tired, it pulls you in and gets you involved. So it's so easy to be poisoned with that kind of several hours of that kind of activity versus getting outside and unleashing a different kind of feeling. There is a feeling that's fed back when you play a high adrenaline sport, especially one of these games that I don't know them all, but the games that the young people are involved with, whether it's on a tablet, on a phone, or on a station. And there is a reward that's released, but at the sacrifice of having problems down the line, like you didn't get any sleep, you're really wired. If you've ever seen a kid come off of a game, interactive game, usually if you ask them to step away from the game, they're really talking fast and they're trying to get their activity done fast until they wind down. That's not healthy. That's a stress response. That's what I'm trying to avoid with my 40 to 50-year-olds and reverse engineer to get them away from that, because it leads to anxiety, high blood pressure, insomnia, impotence, all that other stuff. Versus the kind of relaxation response or the kind of feeling you get inside and in the muscle when you go outside, when you play the sport, when you play the individual, when you play the group, when you participate, when you break the board, when you get your next belt. All that stuff is also just as rewarding with upsides versus staying indoors. I mean, I love what Steve Jobs did for us, but in a sense I don't love what he did for us because it's taking away from this part. And I think this part is great for technology, but it's bad for health. So it can be used two different ways, but again, looking at the biggest diseases of the United States in this decade, I would say I would like to introduce my kids or my young patients into different things every summer. As my adults, I would expect you every summer, because we got some opportunity, every summer, and that's usually 3 months or 4 months in Chicago, to introduce 3 different activities to 4 different activities for the course of the summer. So usually if you participate in, say, a Park District enrollment of a 3-week course in basket weaving, or running, walk-to-run program, or swimming program, or cycling, or hiking outside, or knot tying and navigation, whatever it is, if you participate for 3 weeks and you say, I didn't like it, then you go on to the next one. And you say, I did like it, you go on to the next one. You at least peppered your summer with 4 different activities that you participated in over the course of June, July, August. 3-week blocks, and then you can kind of check them on as saying, I like this, I'm going to do it in the wintertime, or you can check them off saying, I tried it back in 2011, I didn't like that. So that way you have this basket of different things that you can pull out later on when you're trying to find a group to lose weight, or as you become an empty nester, you want to try to investigate, I'll go back to that thing, that list of mine that I tried before. That's what we do as adults. Usually because you didn't do it when you were a kid. So if you can give your kids the opportunity to experience that stuff while they're under your tutelage, or you can pay for their experience, even going abroad and practicing something. What a great opportunity. But if you don't introduce it and you just ask the child, do you want to go out? And the child says, nah, there's a good TV show on, where are you going to get to? I mean, we're supposed to ask our young ones to help us as we get old and gray. But if they're actually dependent on you, where is that going to get you? So hopefully, it's a good question, Chris, and there's a lot more to talk about.